One.
Hi, my name is Elena Maldonado, and today I'm going to be talking about American hip hop culture and what that has to do with intercultural communications. And I picked two theories to talk about this, how it applies. So I picked critical race theory and co-cultural theory. These two theories, in my opinion, go hand in hand because people have to use co-cultural theory in order to fight back against the framework of critical race theory. So some background on what American hip hop culture is. It is its history. It originated in 1970 in the Bronx, New York City. It has to do with music, mostly rap, breakdancing, DJing, graffiti, art, fashion, all those kinds of things. It is a form of resistance, storytelling, and identity expression. It emerged from Black and Latinx youth as a response to marginalization. So down here I have why it matters, and that hip hop isn't just about music, and that goes to it being empowering. So for these Latinx and Black communities, hip hop was a form of empowerment in order for them to fight back against marginalization. I also have that it is a form of creativity, community, storytelling, identity, transformation, resistance, all these things. We see in the identity aspect of things, we see artists like Kendrick Lamar who use storytelling as a way to promote their identity and influence others to have their own identities or whatever it may be. We see a strong pride of roots and background and where people come from in hip hop in their storytelling and creativity, and artists use different aspects of their own life and their own identity to influence others' identities. And the theory that I'm going to be talking about in the next slide is co-cultural theory. Co-cultural theory was created by Mark Orb. He's a communications scholar. Co-cultural theory is how marginalized groups, certain marginalized cultural groups, communicate with other dominant groups using strategies like assimilation, accommodation, or resistance through communication choices. And this would be, for simpler terms, an outsider trying to fit in and using different strategies to do that, specifically a marginalized outsider. We see, for an example, artists who use slang or street slang with their community, with their family, with their friends, but when they're giving interviews or when they're in more formal settings, like maybe a red carpet, they may use more formal language in order to fit in or present themselves in a different way. We see different artists kind of lessening their controversial side in order to align with certain PR movements, or when they try to appeal to like mainstream or corporate belief, they try to be more formal or accommodate to that. Or we see sometimes the opposite where they don't accommodate to that and they choose to be not sign with a label and be an independent artist for deeper reasons. The way that this applies in hip hop, like I said before, we see code switching. We see strategic resistance, and that would be an example. For an example, we could see Kendrick Lamar in the last Super Bowl halftime show. It was a way to speak up against police violence, marginalization towards Black communities, or just in general, people who are on a lesser basis than the strong government or the strong people that are in power. He speaks back against that in his halftime show. We see accommodation, so we can also see artists like in the picture here, A$AP Rocky in the top right corner. He is aligning with a pretty boy image in order to be perceived in a different light. And I pulled from the MIT Open course, I pulled from How Do You Define Your Cultural Self? This quote was really meaningful to me. It says, language not only reflects identity, but it also helps to perform and negotiate identity in different contexts. This as a whole quote embodies co-cultural theory and what it is. The next theory I'm going to be talking about is critical race theory. And like I said, these two theories go hand in hand in my opinion. Critical race theory is basically the core idea that race is a social construct and racism is not merely the product of individual bias, but it also is embedded in legal systems. It's embedded in policy choice. It's embedded in the way that for years, historically, marginalized communities, specifically Black communities, have been treated and the effect that that has on them today. It was introduced in the 1970s along with hip hop, same time, and it was created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado. It is highly controversial since it became very public and mainstream in 2020. And that was due to something that Donald Trump had signed into law. And just people in general just don't want it to be taught because they think it's dangerous. Other people think it's really powerful and empowering to these communities. So it's just very controversial and people go back and forth with it. But that means that it's a strong theory, in my opinion. And I think it really is important. I think it's important for people to be aware of these things. And I think hip hop does a really good job at showing us examples of this. We see in my next slide here, we see the application of it through hip hop. We see that it exposes injustice. We see that it goes back against counter narratives. It's a counter narrative. Hip hop challenges the way that Black communities are portrayed because they're able to make their portrayal how they want it to be through their music, through their art, what stories that they choose to tell. It's a form of cultural resistance. Like I said, Kendrick Lamar in that halftime show, that was a form of cultural resistance through co-cultural theory. And that, like I said, it's fighting against the ideas of what critical race theory is and why it's important. We see even back in the day, NWA going against police brutality, being the main speaking voice for fighting against police brutality. And that is how critical race theory finds its importance within hip hop. And from communicating through the American soundtrack off of MIT OpenCourseWare, I thought this quote, "Music functions as a public voice and a cultural text reflecting power struggles, identities, and resistance." That was an important quote that I thought had to do with this theory as a whole regarding hip hop. And that whole reading, just the whole discussion about communicating through the American soundtrack was very powerful in learning about this. And also from geography, history, and American communication patterns, we see that it explains how racial identity is socially constructed, and that has to do with like where you're at, where you're from, and things like that. Overall, thank you so much for watching my presentation on this. I went a little bit over 8 minutes on my time, but I just wanted to make sure I got all the information in there and just talk about why these two theories are important in applying empowerment. And that's through hip hop, and that's through hip hop culture, that's through fashion, that's through music and storytelling. So thank you so much for watching.